All right. Welcome back to Prayer of the Barren Womb. We are in part 23 of the Four Rivers of Eden. And in my last video, I wandered down a detour to explain a little bit about Northern House, Southern House, that up until this very day, the kingdom of God has been divided, and a divided kingdom cannot stand. So it's been one of the assignments of the Mashiach, of the Messiah, to restore the shattered house of Israel. So I took a little detour to explain Northern House, Southern House. A Northern House has been spoken of in the prophets as the nation of Israel, Ephraim, and sometimes Joseph. Okay, so when you read those names, you're reading about the 10 northern tribes that were scattered into the nations as a result of their idolatry. They got scattered into the nations as a result of Sennacherib, and this would have been around the year 722. Jerusalem, Southern House, the kingdom of Judah, that's the name that the scriptures use for Southern House. Judah stayed in the land a little bit longer than Northern House, but they also experienced their diaspora. They had a timeout of 70 years. And when the fullness of time expired, they were brought back to the land. Only a remnant returned. And this is the restoration of Southern House. It's also the beginning of Second Temple period Judaism. And this is an important time period for us in the Hebraic roots understanding of the Christian faith to reorient our understanding to what Second Temple Judaism, their culture, their idioms, their language, brings a deeper understanding to us of what the original expressions of Christianity would have looked like, what Yeshua left behind, what the first apostles built, what the first several generations of disciples of Yeshua would have looked like. Of course, that all changed with the influx of Gentiles, untaught Aristotelian, Greek-thinking Gentiles flooding the flocks with their mind. And then you also have in the backdrop this deep cultural schism between Jews and Gentiles. The Gentiles came into Northern House, brought their thinking and their understanding with them to the scriptures, and basically we still have a divided house. So I wanted to explain a little bit of what my understanding is in terms of what is taking place right now. We see in the parable of the prodigal son, we see a story being told of the two houses. The younger son wants his riches and his wealth, and he takes them off into the nations. He spends his wealth on prodigal living, wakes up face down in a pig pen, and realizes he could have a better life as a servant in his father's house. This younger son of the father, again, because we lost contact with Second Temple period understanding, the Jews, Southern House listeners of Yeshua, in the moment of his declaring this parable, the parable of the prodigal, would have understood the younger son to be idiomatic, a picture of Ephraim, the northern 10 tribes. Ephraim chronologically was younger than Judah. Ephraim was the grandson of Jacob. Judah was the fourth born of Jacob. So idiomatically, they would have understood the younger son to be equivalent with the 10 northern tribes. And what we see in the parable of the prodigal is an awakening happening. Yeshua is prophesying that the 10 northern tribes are going to awaken to their condition, and they're going to return to the Father first. Now, what we see in the parable of Luke 16, we see Southern House has remained with the Father, but the heart of Southern House, Judah, still hasn't synced up. Yes, physically, they're with the Father. They're still serving the Father through Torah, but their heart is not synced up with the Father. The younger son, idiomatically speaking of Ephraim and Israel, the 10 northern tribes that have been scattered, will come back to the Father. They'll sync up with the Father's heart through teshuvah, through repentance, Father, forgive me. I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Throw the cloak on him. Throw the sandals. Throw the ring. Let's have a feast. Let's have a party. The prodigal is going to have, the younger son is going to have an understanding of the father's heart before the older. So we find in the story of the prodigal that Southern House is still with the father, but he hasn't understood the beauty of his brother coming home. He's resentful. Still have brotherly tension going on in the family right to this very day as I record this. Southern House still does not recognize Northern House. Judah still does not recognize Ephraim as a legitimate brother. And what we see happening right now as I speak is Christianity, what I'm going to call Sunday, Easter, Christmas Christianity, is awakening to the fact that their Savior, their Messiah, left behind a discipleship that looks nothing like what they're practicing. And we are waking up to this. We are waking up to this monolithic thing that calls itself Christianity, doesn't look anything like what Yeshua left behind, what the apostles built, what the first several centuries of believers would have practiced. I should say generations, the first several generations of believers. In fact, we read in the book of Acts that the Way, the name The Way, is a sect of Judaism. It could be no other. True discipleship of Yeshua had to be an expression of keeping Torah. And so this is one of the things that we're discovering 2,000 years later, is that the Torah has never been done away with. That this is what it actually looks like to be a disciple and follower of a Jewish teacher. All right. Anyhow, I thought I'd bring a little bit more clarification to the journey that I'm on. I still want to get back. To the the 4 rivers of Eden. All right, so let's take a look. Let's take a closer look. Let's rein this in and get back to the story of Abram. All right. What I want to do, and before I went on that little rant, we were asking the question, why did God select Abram? We know why God selected Adam. We know why God selected Noah. We don't know why God selected Abram. Or do we? And this is the question where we left off. And for this, we have to turn to Southern House understanding. They have preserved something for us that can only be preserved through an understanding of the Hebrew language. So I want to take a look at that now. But before I do, what I want to set up is kind of a tension between Genesis 11 and Genesis 12. Genesis 11 is where we find the judgment event of the Tower of Babel, and I just want to read through that again and have that in our minds as we move forward for this particular teaching. Genesis chapter 11, verse 1. Now the whole earth had one language and one speech. So we're talking about the entirety of humanity. One world government. They had one language and they had one speech. They had one understanding. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. Then they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They had brick for stone and they had asphalt for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves." Let's keep that in mind. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. But then Yahovah came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And Yahovah said, "Indeed, the people are one. They all have one language. And this what they begin to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So Yahovah scattered abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because there Yahovah confused the language of all the earth, and from there Yahovah scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. So there's some themes that I want us to keep in mind as we read. We're going to kind of set up a juxtaposition between Genesis 11 and Genesis 12. Okay, now Yahovah said to Abram, "Get out of your country and from your family, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you." And here's something that we want to highlight. "And I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed." So in Genesis chapter 11, we have a unified humanity coming together to build a tower whose top is in the heavens, and to make a name, lest we be scattered. So Yahovah sees this intention in the hearts of humanity, sees humanity as a one world government with one purpose and one language, language being the means of creation. The tool that God used to create is language. Seeing that now that man is unified in purpose and language, that they will be able to do anything. And it is because of this that God shatters their language, scatters the tribes, to prevent total slavery from descending upon humanity in the form of a one world government. Okay, so that's what humanity will do with singleness of purpose and singleness of language. And here we find God selecting Abram to come out of the scattered condition of humanity, and he's going to draw Abram out of this scattered tribal condition of humanity. He's going to take Abram and bring him to a land that he will show him. And there God is going to make of Abram a great nation, and he is going to use Abram's name he's going to build Abram's name into a great name. And he's going to gather. So we see this reversal, this tension between judgment and redemption happening. The scattering of the nations, the scattering of the language, the scattering of purpose. God, from that scattered condition of humanity, is pulling a single man from that scattered condition. He's going to draw Abram out of that condition and place him. He's going to plant him in the land of Israel. He's going to make a great nation and a great name. These are very dangerous proposals for the Almighty to suggest to a man. So this is where I want to bring our question of why did God select Abram? And for this, we need the help of the Hebrew scholars who have preserved for us this ancient understanding of why Abram was selected to be the one through whom God will build a nation to be a light to the scattered nations, to the nations who are in darkness, who have created they've erected their own gods, their own religious systems, their own cultures. And God selects Abram to create a nation, and that nation is to be a light to the world, to attract all the other nations back into relationship with Yod He Vav He Elohim. So what was it that stood out about Abram? Because we already know that Adam was selected, Noah was selected, but we don't really know why Abram was selected. All we get is a genealogy, and it's from that genealogy that we derive the understanding that this is the first time a brother has stepped up on behalf of another brother. Okay? In our first Yibum shape, we have parents stepping in for children. In our second Yibum shape, we have children stepping up for parents. In our third Yibum shape, we have brothers stepping in for brother. And so this is the motive that God looks upon and says, there, I can work with that. This will answer Cain's question, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, you are your brother's keeper. And this is what Abram and Nahor both exemplify in what they did. And this is where it's the ancient sages who understand that Abram and Nahor took for themselves the children of Haran. Nahor marries Milcah. Abram marries a woman named Sarai. Now, the sages believe Sarai to be the term of endearment for this other daughter of Haran named Ishka. How do they get that? What makes them think that is because due to the flexibility of the Hebrew language, Ishka, one of the levels of understanding of Ishka is my queen. And Sarai means, her name actually means my princess. So they looked at this and they said, oh, okay, maybe Sarai is the term of endearment for Ishka. So Abram marries Ishka, Nahor marries Milcah, and Abram adopts Lot. So we have Haran here, the fallen brother whose interests in the world still exist. He's still terribly interested about the outcomes for his children, like any parent. The brothers step up on behalf of the brother to take care of their brother's children. And so this is we could never have gotten that. We could never have extracted that understanding from our interpretations of the Hebrew. You don't see that in English. You don't see that in any other language except for Hebrew, the dead language that was resurrected in fulfillment of prophecy that God is going to restore a pure language in the terminal generation. The last generation is going to see the restoration of the pure language. We can only extract this understanding of why God selected Abram through an understanding of Hebrew. The Hebrew language, which had been dead, like Latin, it was a dead language. It was a language of scholarship. Only a handful of scholars even understood Hebrew. And it got resurrected. Now we have a nation, an actual literal people in the land of Israel speaking their own native tongue. And these truths are being restored to the world. The light is going out to the Gentiles. Me, I have no idea if I have, I probably do. I probably have Israeli blood. The prophecy says that Jacob's seed will be in many waters. I think that most people probably have some extraction of the seed of Jacob because his seed was scattered into the whole earth. Anyhow, that has to do, that's my understanding of why God selected Abram to answer the question of Cain back here in Genesis chapter 4. Abram steps up and says, yes, I am my brother's keeper. I will stand up. So back to the thesis, Abram, the third river of life. We have the Yibum shape taking place for the third time in 11 chapters. We have a worldwide judgment event happening. Of course, we need a third river of life. But do the parallels stop with just these two, or actually three, items that I've put forward as an argument for my thesis? No, I believe that the argument strengthens because there's additional support for this. Does Abram have an expulsion event? What we find in the pristine section of the Bible, Genesis 1 and 2, is we find Adam and Eve in perfect relationship with the Creator, have a moral failure, and then an expulsion event takes place. So you have garden failure, expulsion in the pristine. But then we have a reversal, I believe a prophecy in Genesis 2, verse 4, where God talks about, oops, I'm on the wrong page. This is the history of the heavens and the earth. The heavens, birth order, firstborn heavens, earth, secondborn, when they were created in the day that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh Elohim made the earth and the heavens. I believe what we're looking at in Genesis 2:4 is the first reversal of birth order and a prophecy of what would take place downstream. So in the pristine, we find The garden, the test, the judgment, the expulsion. But now that we're in the expulsion, that we have been cast out, I believe we're going to see reverse elements take place. For example, it seems as if Noah is expelled from the first order of creation, and then he goes into his garden testing event. So you see reversal of expulsion and test happening. I believe that is echoed in the life of Abram, where God calls him out from the scattered condition of humanity to a land, draws him to a land, and then we see famine in the land, and then Abram is expelled from the land. So you see an expulsion event, and then I believe we're going to encounter what is the equivalent of the garden testing event in Abraham's life. So let's take a look at that. In Genesis 12, verse 2. Now, real quickly, I just want to make mention of Genesis 12, verse 4 through 9, where immediately following the promise that God makes to Abraham that I'm going to make you a great nation and your name is going to be great and you will be a blessing, he takes Abram from this scattered place of humanity to the land of Israel, the gathered place of redeemed humanity, and says, this is your land. And what does Abram do? He builds permanent altars to the Lord. There he sacrifices and calls upon the name of Yahovah. And he continues to live in a tent and wander from place to place. Now, I think this is a tremendous test. I think this is one of the first tests that Abram passes. If I were promised a land and a nation and a great name, and I was brought to that land, I think I would start building castles. I would start building infrastructure. I would start building political hierarchies. I would start building for what was promised to me. Abram doesn't do that. He dwells in tents even after this. The only permanent structure that Abram makes following this great promise, the only things of permanent are the altars that he builds to the Lord. He continues to dwell in tents. And this, I think, has application for our lives as well. If you want to think of this as a takeaway, there's a difference between promise and process. God gives us the promises of his word, and we can count on that. But what we're tempted to do is to imagine the process of how that promise is going to take place. We're tempted to build scenarios in our thinking of how we think that promise is going to take place. This, I think, is the challenge of Abram right now. The promise of a great name and a great nation and a blessing to all the families of the earth, that's out there. God's going to do it. The challenge to Abraham is how. How is God going to do this? That's process. Abram believes God and entrusts to God the process. He doesn't know how it's going to happen. He doesn't know how it's going to unfold. And so this is one of the things, one of the challenges, one of the lessons that we can extract from Abram's life is holding on to the promise and not putting our own process in place as to how that promise is going to unfold. God's got it. He's going to get us there. We are redeemed. He is going to take us into his embrace. The process is where we can stumble. So, I just wanted to throw that out there for you, but I also want to take a look at Genesis 12:10, which I believe is parallel to the expulsion events. Abram is gathered to a place of promise and blessing, but then what do we find? Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land. This is controversial. Should Abram have stayed in the land? And I don't have an answer for you. But what happened as a result of this expulsion from the land was him descending down into Egypt and Then we have this kind of gray zone deception event. Does that ring a bell? Is that resonate with garden stories? Deception in a garden. Yeah, maybe we've heard of that before. Is there an earlier garden in our Genesis storyline where deception unfolds? And yes, so you have this kind of this parallel. I believe that there's a parallel in when Abram descends from the land and goes down to the land of Egypt to dwell there. It came to pass, when he was close to entering Egypt, that he said to Sarai his wife, "Indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Therefore it will happen when the Egyptians see you that they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you." The scriptures tell us that God desires truth in the inmost parts. This reads as deception, that Pharaoh was deceived as to the identity of Abram's wife, Sarai. And so deception descends into the household of Pharaoh as a result of Abram and Sarai conjuring this plan. Of course, we know what happens as a result is that the Pharaoh takes Sarai to be his wife, and then plagues fall upon Pharaoh's house. And then Pharaoh approaches Abram, "Why have you done this to me?" So it was when Abram came into Egypt that the Egyptians saw that the woman, that she was very beautiful, and the princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. So not only has Abram lost possession of the land, he's lost possession temporarily of the means by which the nation will be formed in Pharaoh's house. And he treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep and oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys and camels. But the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go your way." So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Now, the understanding of the ancient sages is that one of the male and female servants that was given to Abram as a result of this was Hagar. And Hagar, it's thought that Hagar was actually one of the daughters of Pharaoh himself. And that's another story, but if you take a listen to her name probably wasn't Hagar. The Hebrew word Hagar actually means the ger, the stranger. That's not a name, that's a title. The stranger, there's a stranger now in the house of Abram. Yeah, okay, we have to deal with this. So, is there a serpent in the garden? Yeah, bear with me. Anyhow, I think I'll wrap this up right here to say that what I see in this 13th or in the 12th chapter of Genesis is a parallel to the expulsion event of Adam, but it's in reverse order. Adam gets the garden, the test, the failure, then the expulsion. Seems that Noah has expulsion, the garden, the test, and failure. So the expulsion event and the test in the garden happen in reverse order here, post Genesis 2, verse 4. I think that pattern is duplicated in Abram, where we see the expulsion event, and then we get the test, the failure. And we'll take a closer look at that as we move forward in the next study. But the question we have to ask is, does that pattern repeat itself down here in the Fourth River? I believe it does. Because we're in the upside down, because we are in the reversed realm of the pristine, we're in the realm of reversed birth order. I believe we're going to see an expulsion event happen here before a garden test. So keep that in mind as we move forward. So what I'm attempting to do is build argument layer upon layer to support the idea that Abram is in the third river of life and that he is experiencing the same fundamental challenges that have been with humanity since the garden. Okay, so I'm going to close here and thank you for your time. I hope to see you again in part 24 of the Four Rivers of Eden.